So, we're going to talk about How to Kill a Monster. That's right, one of the original 62 books that I think is probably the most underrated original 62 book that I can think of.
True, and yeah, that's pretty true. That's true, and yeah, that's true.
The main reason being because I loved this TV episode when I was a kid. I used to watch this TV episode because I had it on DVD all the time when I went to my cousin's house, when I went to family's house to go get babysitted, and I loved it. I mean, I loved the monster. I loved how the episode ran. I loved the whole hiding from the monster idea. And as soon as I got older, I realized that that episode is not that good. The stuff in the book makes a lot more sense. It has a lot more build-up, and even the weirder parts towards the end of the book that were left out in the episode, I still think that they have a little bit more charm and a little bit more, I guess, like uniqueness to it than what the episode did. The episode was basically just like a watered-down rush version of this book.
Hey, this motherfucker got them fake keys! I gotta get out of here!
And considering, I think that this episode may have came out before the book was fully conceptualized and made, so I can give it a little bit of slack. So yeah, in regards to this book, however, as much as I liked it compared to the episode, and as much as I think the book is a great book on its own, I noticed that a lot of people who are reviewing it, specifically Michael Goosebumps fan, Goosebumps completionist, shout out to you too, I love your channels, I noticed that they didn't like the book as much. They seemed to think it was very forgettable. And I noticed that one half of the fandom thinks that this book is memorable and is a fan favorite, and the other half seems to think it's very forgettable. It's not necessarily bad, but it's kind of meandering. It's not that good.
We fight.
This is gonna end well.
And it ends up being very forgettable in people's eyes. And I happen to be on the other side. I think that not only is the idea of how the story runs in terms of there's a monster stuck in the house, the kids are trapped in this house with nowhere to go, and they have to figure out how to avoid and kill it, that's an idea that hasn't really been done in Goosebumps ever since this book was conceived. It's unique. It really helped out the book in terms of making it stand out plot-wise, and I think it offers a lot more tension because when you read the book, you imagine yourself being in this scenario and what you would do. Obviously, in a lot of horror movies, you get the whole idea of, you know, you're stuck in the house with a monster, stuck in the house with a serial killer, and you don't know how to get out. You have to figure out how to survive the whole...
You're behind the couch.
What? How do you know that?
I can, see your feet.
Whole Home Alone kind of thing. This is basically a Home Alone with R.L. Stine's take on it, and it's with a monster. So I don't think that's an idea that's been done, if at all, ever since this book has been made. So you have the uniqueness factor to the story. You also have the fact that I think the book is very creative compared to some other Goosebumps books. I mean, in terms of the actual plot line itself, not much happens throughout the book, but the way the monster's designed, the whole idea about what the monster represents, some of the ties you get at the end of the book as to what the world of the swamp is really like, and also the way that, you know, Stine was trying to come up with like creative ways for the kids to avoid the monster, the ways to kill it, and then sort of the ending of the book. I think that all of it was basically very, like, I guess unique, you could say. I haven't really read a Goosebumps book like that as of right now that has that level of uniqueness, because so far all the Goosebumps book I've read, all of them seem to be either very adventurous, you know, the kids go around, you know, wherever the location is, they get into many different events, there's a lot of different problems that occur, or you get a book, like, let's say, The Girl Who Cried Monster, which is very, like, condensed, you know, it's only between her house and the library, but it's very to the point, it's creepy, but there's not a lot of, like, I guess you could say creativity in it. And then you have The Haunted School, which is very creative, but even that was much more of like an adventurous type book. This book is very much just in the house, you're trapped in there, not a lot is going to happen, so Stine has to find ways to make it creative, and I think he did a great job. The only real complaint I have about this book is, I would say, the grandparents and the characters. The two main characters, which I don't exactly remember their names. I think it might be Gretchen and Clark, or Gretchen and Clark. I think that might be it. They are sort of just average. They're not really like that creative.
Between me and you. Know who I am. Please, God. Please, I can't be no side character. I'm not built like a side character. They weak as hell. I'm not weak.
Characters. Clark is just basically a kid who gets scared a lot. You know, he freaks out pretty easily, and he's a baby compared to his older sister, who's a lot more brave, and she's a lot more like curious. She tries to figure out stuff. She's a lot more suspicious of her grandparents, and the grandparents really are just one-dimensional. They're just sort of there just to drive along the plot line and be the main reason of the problem in the book. And I think that they are overall what makes this book forgettable, just those characters in itself. It doesn't really matter what characters are in the book. You're not going to really remember. They're just there to move the story along. And the reasoning behind how, you know, this whole situation happens was not fully drawn out. In the book, it basically describes that the monster is trapped inside of the house mainly because one day the grandparents happened to stumble upon this huge thing entering their house, and then they basically locked it inside of a room, and you know, ever since then they haven't been able to get rid of it. So what they do is they just bring up food to it, make sure it's fed, and keep it locked in there. And you find this all out after the grandpa's bringing a huge stack of pancakes up to a room. It's extremely weird. It's kind of just rushed and thrown in there. And that's the only real complaint I have about the book, because after that, once the grandparents leave and Gretchen and Clark discover the note that basically says, hey, this is what happened, this is the monster up there, and they specifically tell them to not open the door because obviously you're going to let the thing loose and you're going to be stuck in the middle of the swamp bayou with nowhere to go. And what ends up happening is you realize, oh, it's too late. They already opened the door. Damn kids got in that door, opened it up, and now they can't reverse what happened. So now they just have to survive. And the monster itself is very, I guess you could say, scary. It's like apparently built like a gorilla. It's like part gorilla, part alligator. You know, it's got green fur. It's got huge paws / claw hands. It's got the face of an alligator. At the end of the book, it says that if you look into its eyes, there are like worms swimming around in the liquid where the pupil is. So it's supposed to represent like the swamp. You know, it smells like the swamp. It looks like a bunch of different animals that combined into one from the swamp. Smells like the swamp. Has, you know, the green fur comes from the moss and the plant life that's out there in the bayou. So all these things basically represent, you know, kids dealing with an actual swamp monster, one that represents the environment itself. So it's a very creative monster. And the way they try to kill it in terms of, you know, it chasing them around the house, throwing furniture at them, trying to grab them, and they have to run away to, you know, an unconstructed part of the house where it has to fall down, you know, a height, survives that. Then they have to poison its food. I'm pretty sure that they take like a blueberry pie and stuff a bunch of like cleaner in there, like a bunch of like disinfectant and cleaner and poisonous chemicals in there so it can eat it. And that scene is very tense, because once you get to that scene, they're basically under, I guess, like a kitchen table, and they're hiding from the monster as they're waiting for it to eat the bait. And once it gets there, you hear about it, you know, walking around the kitchen, jumping on top of the table. It like grabs the stove door and sends it flying. It just rips it off, starts gobbling up and eating everything. And you get really tense that all it takes is for this monster to literally look under the table and these two are toast. And obviously it ends up eating the thing, so you don't get to that. But you feel the tension throughout that scene. And I would say that that kitchen scene is probably the best scene in this entire book. Because once you read it, you actually feel like scared. Because you're imagining yourself in this situation, much as you would any other horror movie or a piece of fiction that's like this. So I think that adds a lot to the story about the whole immersion factor. You know, if I was stuck in this house, which you can picture, you know, very easily by Stein's great descriptions. If I was stuck in this huge house, you know, what would I do? Would I do the same thing as these kids? Is there a better way that I can get out of this situation? You debate that as you read. So I think that helps out. And then the ending to the book, I'm not going to talk about the twist ending, but the ending to the actual book is how they kill the monster. And that's when they sort of realize what this monster represents. And obviously we get to the twist ending of the story, which I'm not going to fully describe as to, because I don't want to spoil you on what it was. However, the twist ending to the book makes it a lot scarier, because let's just say they happened to find a second note which had slipped under their view, and the second note basically describes why they shouldn't go out and run into the swamp as a way to escape, because Gretchen, the older sister, happens to hear this whistling throughout the book. She hears it out in the swamp. She thinks that she's hearing things. She thinks it might just be the wildlife. Maybe it's like the muck or the swamp itself that fires out this whistling sound. And it turns out, no, the whistling sound is something else. And there might be multiple whistling sounds out there that may or may not relate to certain things, looking for a certain something, because there's a much larger picture to that swamp where, hey, this monster may have not been the only thing that's out there, and they might be searching for it, and yeah, it's better to stay indoors.
Really makes you think.
So yeah, the ending to this book is basically describing why you shouldn't go outside. So yeah, not only are these kids in danger inside, they're also in danger outside. So yeah, basically, they're effed. Safest way to put it, these kids are screwed. They're effed. But it does make for an interesting idea for a sequel, where if Stein did decide to make a sequel to How to Kill a Monster, he could either go with a completely new storyline with the same concept, or he could continue on where now it's not the kids, you know, figuring out how to kill this monster on the inside. They have to figure out how to deal with these monsters that are on the outside, right? So now it's escaping from the outside back into their house. There you go. All up until their grandparents show up. There you go, Stein. I just gave you a sequel idea. Now you can continue with it. Although he's probably had this idea and maybe forgot because he's written so many books. I don't know. So that's my review of How to Kill a Monster. Overall, how would I rate the book? I would rate this book a solid 7.5 to 8 out of 10. I don't think it's the best book in the world. There are some weaknesses to it. However, I think it might be one of the most underrated original 62 books, and you may even argue one of the most underrated books in general for the Goosebumps series. I've seen a lot of people being very divisive on it, saying that it's forgettable, but honestly, I really love the book, and even though it's nothing extraordinary, I think it's a good book. I think it has a concept which is very unique just from the fact that it hasn't been done ever since this book's conception. And I think that it sparks a really good twist ending that would make for a really good sequel setup and a good little inverse to what we saw in this book versus what we could see in the future. So that's all it is for this review. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what books or other stories of Goosebumps you'd like me to review, or what you want to see upcoming. So far, I have a few books that I've already covered that I plan on reviewing next, and I also can review later on some more stories and scary stories that are outside of Goosebumps. Just let me know your own thoughts and opinions, and let me know how you felt about the book. Did you disagree? Did you agree with me? Let me all know down below. And that's all it is for this review. Sorry if it was all over the place, but again, I haven't read this book in a long time, and obviously, Goosebumps books are not the most complicated, especially in regards to this one, but just know that I had a good time, and I would recommend that you guys read as well. So, that's all it is for today. Deuces.
It's over. Go home.